Greetings. My name is Hollis Thoms, and I am the composer of the three works you will hear performed by the Dakota Pro Musica under the direction of my son, Dr. Jason Thoms. My three literary tales are based on Dante's La Vita Nuova, and Dante lived from 1265 to 1321. Geoffrey Chaucer's The Nun's Priest Tale, or Chanticleer, and Chaucer lived from 1342 to 1400. And Robert Burns' Tam O'Shanter, and Robert Burns lived from 1759 to 1797. I collect rare books, and so many of my compositions are based on the reading of books that I have in my personal collection and books I have studied during my academic degrees or personal reading. Dante, who you see right here, picture of him. The three love dreams from Dante's La Vita Nuova are set for baritone, guitar, and cello. Dante fell in love with a young girl named Beatrice, and she became the focus of his ardent love and poetic verses when she was very young. She unexpectedly died when she was 24, leaving him devastated. But even after her death, he could not get her out of his mind. She was his poetic muse, inspiring him even after her death. In 1292, at the age of 27, Dante wrote La Vita Nuova, which poetically describes his encounter with his beloved prior to her death. And here is a picture of Dante seeing Beatrice, and here is Florence. The creation of his monumental Divine Comedy, describing hell, purgatory, and paradise, began in 1308, which he worked on until his death in 1321, and was inspired by his continuing love for Beatrice. In the work, Beatrice, who was in heaven, returns to him at the end of his trip through purgatory to guide him to the beautiful visions of paradise. His early erotic love of Beatrice in La Vita Nuova is transformed into a godly love for her as he meets her again in his imagination in the Divine Comedy. Dante's manuscript of Divine Comedy no longer exists, and the earliest copy of the poem dates from 1336, and the first printed edition in 1472. I have in my rare book collection an early 1526 edition with many woodcuts and cantos, and the cantos are surrounded by an exhaustive commentary, and another edition in 1834 of just the Italian text with no commentary. I also have a late 19th century English translation of La Vita Nuova. On one of our travels to Europe, my wife Jacqueline and I visited Florence, the Dante house, and saw the chapel where it is believed Dante first gazed on Beatrice. The painting that I am holding is an imagined scene of Dante's first encounter with Beatrice in beautiful Florence. And here's that picture. Chaucer, and here's Chaucer. Chanticleer, a proud singing rooster, and here is Chanticleer, if you want to see him, is the central figure in Chaucer's wonderful animal fable from his Canterbury Tales, which he wrote from 1386 until the end of his life. Canterbury Tales described a pilgrimage and stories told for the entertainment by 29 Christian pilgrims going from the Tabard Inn in Southwark in London to the Canterbury Cathedral to pay religious homage to the martyr Archbishop Thomas Becket. The innkeeper at the Tabard Inn challenged each of the pilgrims to tell 2 stories, each going to Canterbury, and 2 stories coming back home from Canterbury. And the winner of the best story would receive a free meal back at his tavern when they returned. So the Chanticleer tale is known as the Nun's Priest Tale. Chanticleer takes after his father and is a magnificent rooster singer, and is attended by many wives, He is a braggart. One night he has a dream that a fox will sneak up on him and kill him. He worries that the dream will come true. His wife tells him not to worry and that medicines will cure him of his bad dreams. He then brushes the dreams off and continues his braggart ways. A fox does indeed invade his yard to flatter him and catches Chanticleer by surprise. He almost kills Chanticleer, but the braggart rooster is saved at the last moment. The moral: avoid being a braggart and being left vulnerable by those who flatter you. My musical setting of the fable is set for tenor, Chanticleer, soprano and alto, the wives, and baritone, fox, along with guitar, harpsichord, and strings. The various characters will be wearing appropriate hats to designate their respective characters. In my rare book collection, I have a beautiful 1830 6-volume Pickering edition of Canterbury Tales, and a facsimile of the famous Ellesmere manuscript of the early 1400s, which is in the Huntington Library in California. And here is the facsimile of that wonderful manuscript of Canterbury Tales. The original manuscript of Chaucer's work, like Dante's, no longer exists, and for both Dante and Chaucer's works, only later scribal copies now exist as the manuscript passed from scribe to scribe in order to duplicate the text for wealthy patrons and to read, and that then was over time eventually lost, before the printing press made copying more widespread and universally accessible. A few years ago, my wife and I, again on one of our trips, spent a week at Canterbury Cathedral replicating the famous pilgrimage of Chaucer and seeing the Thomas Becket Chapel and visiting a Chaucer bookstore there. Tam O'Shanter is Burns's greatest poem, and here is Burns. Like Chaucer's Chanticleer fable, Burns's tale, Tam Tale, has a moral. Tam loves to drink with his friends against the advice of his wife Kate. One evening, after drinking with his friends, he rides toward home on his horse Meg and passes Kirk Alloway, where, inspired by his drinking, sees a vision of singing and dancing by the devil, witches, and warlocks. Because of his drunkenness, he lacks any self-control and shouts out enthusiastically, "Well done, Cutty Sark," at the hellish scene. In an instant, all the witches and warlocks chase after him as he frantically rides Meg to the river dune toward home. As he crosses the river, the evil spirits vanish. Tam is left to think about the moral of his experience. He needs to follow the advice of his wife Kate and stay away from the intoxicating John Barleycorn. My 30-minute work, which you will hear, is based on this tale and uses almost all of the text, and is scored for baritone, tenor, soprano and alto, piccolo, oboe, horn, trombone, and strings. Burns's Tam O'Shanter poem has captured the imagination of a number of composers. I have recently done a study of 3 scores based on this tale. Howard Glover wrote a 30-minute cantata for singers and orchestra in 1855, which you can see right here, using some select lines from the poem that was prepared by no less than Hector Berlioz. And this is one of the few remaining published scores that I have. George Whitefield Chadwick wrote a 20-minute tone poem on the tale in 1915 that is similar in orchestral scope to a Richard Strauss tone poem and is a marvelous piece that needs to be played by American symphony orchestras. And there's the score there. And Malcolm Arnold wrote a very popular, mostly in England, 8-minute overture in 1955, and there's the score there. In my rare book collection, I have a number of Burns books, including an 1854 edition of his works, which is right here, and an 1868 edition of illustrations from the Tam O'Shanter Tale, which is there. My family and I spent a year in Scotland during 1986 and 1987 when I was on a Fulbright teacher exchange, and I had to teach the Tam O'Shanter poem and the Arnold Overture to my middle school students as part of the music curriculum. Robert Burns is considered Scotland's greatest person, and his poetry and songs are known by everyone in Scotland. On January 25th, his birthday is celebrated by everyone throughout the country. And during Burns Supper, where his poetry is read, songs are performed, and where everyone eats haggis and drinks scotch. We all love to hear and tell stories, and Dante, Chaucer, and Burns's imaginative tales, literary tales, provide us with much literary and musical enjoyment. I hope that my 3 literary tales will capture your imagination and prove to be a delightful aesthetic experience. Thank you.